Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and thanks for tuning in to the Dealer Insights podcast, where we go under the hood, bumper to bumper, and just about everywhere in between, discussing topics important to dealers of all types and sizes. Your time is valuable, so thanks for riding along for this episode of Dealer Insights.
Welcome to episode 1 of Dealer Insights, powered by Strolid. I'm Sean.
I'm Vinny. And we're very excited to be here. I'm very excited to be with my buddy, Sean.
It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be a lot of fun. So This is the kickoff episode for Dealer Insights, a brand new podcast that focuses on insights around and inside the automotive industry. There will be a heavy focus on these podcast episodes of customer experience, of sales process, of really the inner workings of what happens in automotive. And episode 1 is really going to focus on some of those pieces that if you're newer to the automotive industry, you may or may not know some of its history. And it's really important in terms of context to understand, well, how were cars sold in the 60s or the 50s or the 80s or really anything before the dawn of the internet? Because that has changed the car business pretty substantially. Would you agree?
100%.
Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to share with the audience from your perspective is, like, when did you actually get into the car business? Like, what year was it?
1994, which makes me old.
94. Wow. Yeah, I
was a young.
I got in 91, was working in a parts warehouse while in college. So
there you go.
We're both.
Actually, I'll take that back. I started working in automotive in 1987. I worked at a Sears Automotive in my town, and I used to work in the battery room. I used to carry batteries out to the technicians, and then I started changing oil, and then I started selling in the drive, like these oil change coupons. And I remember the general manager of the store said, all right, when someone comes in, just make sure you offer this to every single person. So like within 3 hours, I sold every single book that he gave me. And he came back and he was like, what? You sold them all? And then he brings all the service writers in and he was like, you see this kid? You guys can't sell one of these things. He just sold like 20 of them. So he's like, how did you do that? I go, I don't know. I just thought it was a good deal. So I told everybody about it. That was my first kind of like glimpse into selling. You know, I realized like that was very hard. Why aren't these other guys doing it? All I did was show it to everybody. Sometimes it's that simple, you know.
Did those service?
It was a good deal. It was like 10 oil changes for like $80 back then.
Oh, yeah.
It was $8 in oil change. It's like, how the hell do you?
That's amazing.
Turn that down.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So when you got into the dealer side of the business in 94, was there a reason? Like, why did you get into it? Was it just, hey, this is a good job, or did somebody, I'm curious to know from everybody that gets into the car business, who invited you in? Like, what was why didn't you do something else?
Yeah. So my dad was in the business, and he's always been a great salesman. And did F&I and all this stuff and made decent money, like really good money. And I saw a lot of my friends out of college. I started at Putnam Investments when I was out of college. And actually, even before that, Prudential. And I'm thinking, I'll go work for one of these big companies. Well, I went into Prudential the second day of training. They asked me to write down 100 names of people that I knew. I was like, huh? What do you need that for? They're like, because we're going to call them and sell them insurance. I'm like, no, you're not. This isn't what I expected for this job. And then I got my Series 6.
Mary Kay.
Yeah, I got my Series 6 at Putnam Investments, and I thought that was a cool industry, learn about mutual funds and all that. And they're local. And basically, I was just on the phone helping people with questions on their 401ks. And it wasn't much money, and So me and a buddy of mine spent a summer selling T-shirts during the World Cup. And when it was it came to Boston, it was like 92, I think. Maybe 90, yeah, somewhere around there, 94 maybe. Anyway, I made a whole bunch of money selling T-shirts. More than I was making at either of those other companies. So I'm thinking sales. And then I told you about my initial experience selling those coupon books. And I don't want to say I thought I was good at it. I just didn't think it was that difficult. And a lot of people think sales is difficult.
Yeah.
And I've always kind of figured, if I can sell something that someone needs, that's pretty easy. So then my first, I decided to go work for a car dealership against my dad's wishes. He didn't want me in the business. Me and a buddy of mine went to a place that no longer exists. And I didn't know this at the time, but a lot of the guys worked for another company, another dealership that was put out of business because they were screwing people. And the attorney general shut them down. And then they all migrated to this place. So when you talk about sharks, man, this place was rough. And back then, they didn't have transparency. There was no prices on windows. I mean, salespeople didn't even know what the prices of the cars were. And they would hammer people, and so I did that for
no window stickers?
No. Well, no. They had window stickers on new. I'm talking about used, pre-owned. So.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. And basically what they wanted me to do is get an offer and a credit card. It was a real hardcore place. Like if you went to the desk without a credit card, if you ever seen the movie Suckers, that's kind of what it was like. They were pretty rough.
I have.
Yeah. And so I spent a year there and I hated it. I didn't even want to go to work because I felt bad for the customers. I had one girl, to give you a quick example, one girl interested in the 1992 Isuzu Rodeo. That was like this light blue. She loved it. And so how much is it? I said, well, you got to come inside. So I bring her inside. I go to the desk. They tell me like 18 grand. And I'm thinking, this thing's 5 years old and like a new one's 25. And I'm like, all right, whatever. I go over and she's like, oh, that's way too much for me. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, I got trained to get an offer and a credit card. So I said, well, how much were you looking to spend? And she said, I think like 15. So I got the credit card, went to the desk. And then they would come over and like hammer her. I didn't really do much selling back then. And let me just shut my phone off. Anyway, they got her up to $17,000 and sold it. My commission was like $2,000. Yeah. And I was like, what the heck, this poor girl? Like, I felt bad for her. Like, they probably could have sold it at 15, no problem, and made money. But that was the car business back then. And I think a lot of people today don't realize how bad it actually was. And that's why I chuckle a lot when people talk about, oh, I hate buying a car today. Well, whew. Yeah, well, it wasn't like, well, and that was like the early 90s and late 80s. It was really rough. I think previous to that. Anyway, I left there and went to another dealership, gave it another shot. And I met two of my mentors, David Rosenberg and David Holt. Both are very successful guys in the industry. And they had a different approach, which was the golden rule, right? Take care of your customer. And I built a career there, with them because I like them a lot and I like their philosophies. I did leave them for a couple of years. I moved to the South Shore with my wife in 98. Tried to get out of the car business. I never really liked the car business. I never really liked selling cars, but I was pretty good at it. Anyway, David asked me he said he had this new concept for this thing called a business development center. Toyota was pushing it on him. And that's how I got into the BDC business. I started it from scratch. No real CRM. We built a database out of Access, Microsoft Access, and collected data. I had sheets of inventory. All we did was take phone calls. This was like 96. And it got me out of the selling of cars and got me into, just dealing with customers. And that's kind of how I got into it. But I got into it, number one, was because at the end of the day, a lot of my friends were making 20, 30 grand a year right out of college. And my first check from a car sale was like $2,000. So,
yeah, you were addicted, right?
Well, I always liked money. I didn't like the way they went about it. I knew there had to be a different way to sell people cars. And I think, you and I have talked about this before. There's all of a sudden in the last 15 years, there's all this talk about different generations, right? The big baby boomers and we're Gen X, right? So we're old now, but I remember when Gen X was new. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we were like the first generation, I think, that was exposed to technology at a young age. And we were exposed to ESPN and CNN, and we were exposed to a lot of the 80s really transformed quickly, into all kinds of different media. Back then, the newspaper was still a big deal. But yeah, we can get into the history, because I think that's interesting. The history of the car business, I mean, to me, goes like this. Cars were invented, and most people lived in concentrated areas like New York City or Boston or Atlanta or, LA, Miami, and so on, Chicago. So you didn't go very far. Like I live in Windham, New Hampshire now. So I remember as a kid, New Hampshire was like where you went camping. Like nobody really lived there.
Yeah.
It's like all my family was within. I lived 7 miles. I grew up 7 miles north of Boston, and all my family were within 10-15 minute drive of us. So you didn't go very far.
Yeah.
So all the dealers back in the day, like probably in the 50s, 60s, which I wasn't born then, but they were all local dealers, right? You went to your local dealer. And men and women were like loyal to brands like Ford. I'm a Ford guy. I'm a Chevy guy. I'm a Chrysler guy. So there wasn't really a whole lot of need for there wasn't any really need for shopping. You just went there and bought a car. That's what you did. I'm sure there was some haggling and stuff like that going on. But then again, the other thing is the car was only like $1,500 to maybe $3,000 back in the 40s, 50s, 60s. They only had maximum 2-year terms to take a loan out on a car. That's as high as you could go. So, of course, the brand loyalty was really strong because you didn't own a car for more than 2 years. Every 2 years you traded it, got a new one. So before it actually broke down and all that, and you loved your car, and then the 70s hit, which is very, very similar to what's going on today with inflation. So a car went from being around $5,000 to about like 15 in a matter of 10 years. And that's what inflation is. The prices just get out of control. And that's what's going on right now with, gas prices, and cars are really expensive right now and so forth. So that's when shopping started. And from what I gather, right, and have read through, people just started saying, hey, listen, they're expensive, so I don't want to get screwed anymore. So they started shopping mainly by phone. Dealers started using like print more, hooks more, like lowball prices in the newspaper and all that kind of stuff. Radio, obviously, TV. Ira ran David Rosenberg's father. Ira was also a very, he was like a mentor to me. He was a salesman too. He's like my dad. These guys were salesmen. I mean, they kissed babies. They came out and hugged people and were always on TV, and everybody knew who they were, and they were happy that people knew who they were, and they did want to take care. He did want to take care of customers, which was really exciting for me because I left a place that was like, they were just hammering people. And they became wildly successful, Ira, and I got to watch it grow and expand, and they helped me with my career and all that kind of stuff. But the shopping started in the 70s and the 80s, and then David said, hey, listen, our salespeople they're terrible at taking phone calls, so this BDC idea, you're going to take all the phone calls. And I'm like, all right, I can do that. And he really wanted me to do it, so I did it. And then I left for a couple of years, and I came back. And David Holt said to me, can you come back and do the BDC again? I was like, no, I don't really want to do that. And here's why. The resistance that I got from the old school guys was unbearable.
Sales guys?
Unbearable, yeah. Because we were one of the first groups to quote prices to customers. That was like taboo. Why would you do that? Oh, so a customer would come in and say, "Oh, no, I got this price quoted to me," and the salespeople would be mad back then because they used to,
Was that one of the primary reasons why the salespeople would be mad? Is because of what you were doing in providing pricing for people before they would come into the dealership?
It wasn't always about pricing, right? I never looked at BDC or. To me, it's really simple. You do all this marketing, you spend all this money to do what? To drive traffic, drive leads, drive calls, drive walk-in traffic. Like a walk-in customer is a lead. It's just the best lead. It's the best lead you have. It would be great if they all walked in, but they don't. They started calling in the 80s.
Yeah.
They started calling in the 90s.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as you and I know, the emergence of the internet really blew it open. Because now they could go online and go to Edmunds and research what the dealer owned the car for. Like the first place I worked at, right? I remember this like it was yesterday. I had a customer come in. This was probably 2004, 2005. Customer comes in and says, 1994, 1995, and asked one of these like real hardcore like car guys, "I want to see the invoice." And he said, the manager looks him in the eye. This is what reminds me of suckers. He looks the customer in the eye and he says, you got $10 million? The customer's like, what? What are you talking about? No, I don't have $10 million. And he's like, well, when you get $10 million, you can go buy a dealership and look at all the invoices you want.
No.
Oh yeah. That's a true. That truly happened right in front of me. Like, and there were more. I don't want to bore you to death, but there were more incidences like that. That made me think, wow. I'm sure. Like I got to see the real inside of why people hated the car business back then,
Oh, yeah. I mean, and you know this, but I only sold cars for a short period of time. I've done so much else in the industry for a much longer period of time. But I did sell cars, and most people that know me know why I did for the time period that I did. But just in a couple of years of selling cars, the experiences, and the internet was around then. That was like early 2000s, and it still was shocking. Like there was just a lot of toxicity, unnecessary behavior, right? That gave the industry, in my opinion, kind of the stain of bad reputation and why people don't. I mean, you mentioned a couple of things here just in the last few minutes around how, the internet changed and, juxtaposed to when you got into it. Imagine in 1994 what somebody had to do to just do a research on, hey, I want to buy a new vehicle, a truck, a car, or whatever. In 1994, how would you even research buying a new family car?
I'll tell you how. It was real simple. There's a dealer here locally. He had a slogan for years. I don't think it works so well for him right now, but he still uses it. Shop us last, you'll love us. So customers would shop 3 dealers, is what they would do. So you'd want to be the last dealer that they came to. Because if you're the first one, they say, no, I got to go talk to 2 others. And that's when they would get, in the old days, lowballed. So a dealer would say, even if I could sell it to you for this price right now, you wouldn't buy it? And they would say no. And then they would leave with that number in their head. Then they'd go to the other 2 places and tell the other 2 dealers, hey, look I could get this for over there. And then they would come back and say, no. I asked you what if, right? And it was just such a ridiculous game of
right.
like a game
Remember
of shells,
when I said, remember when I used the word today? Is there anything that I could get you to drive this home today?
I absolutely hated the game, man. I hated it. I used to tell customers like,
oh yeah,
don't go. Listen, this is a really good price. Why are you going to go torture yourself and go to 2 other places? And they would.
2 days later, they come back. No, that price was only good that day.
I used to try to beg them.
So then the customer has to say, so it's gone up by $5,000? Yes, it has.
So like, I'm not a rocket scientist, right? Like I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but it was pretty easy for me to recognize that there was opportunity in this industry because I saw, I think I've told you this before, but when I was in college, a professor had showed us all on a computer. So like my first 2 years in college, I used a typewriter. And then I remember the third year someone showed me a word processor and I was like, wow, that's game changing because I never took a typing class. So it was like, but this professor showed us this new thing called AOL, right? And I'm like, that's really interesting. And it just like, it interested me right away. And I didn't totally understand it. I know it's hard for people to not understand how you couldn't understand the internet, but it was hard to get your head around it. Like it was hard to get your head around the fact that newspapers would go away. Dealers spent so much money advertising in newspaper, print, radio back then. And so how could that go away, right? You would go out of business if you didn't advertise in one of those mediums. Well, I saw it.
Yeah. My first experiences with the internet were, I'll never forget them because the content that my friend who was on the internet, who was a year younger than me, and he was a little more techie, a little nerdy. He's like, you got to check this thing out, man. The internet's amazing. And so, I remember, I'll just leave it at this. The one of the first things, most people would think it's one thing especially for guys. It wasn't that. It was a website. I believe it was called Dan's Gallery of the Grotesque. And it was kind of like, do you remember, you're in that same age group as me. Do you remember, you could go and rent Faces of Death at the, that was like the big thing. Like, oh, it's so gross because it was like, and it was like real, terror. It was just awful.
It was disgusting. I remember that.
This website was similar to that, only 1,000 times worse. And I was like, how can this information and these images, this content be in a place where the public can access it? Because to me, it was like, it burns things into my brain that I still see when I'm talking about it right now. And so to your point of, the internet was a big deal, but getting your brain around how is this going to change businesses? Specifically, in our case, back then, how was the internet going to change the automotive industry? And I say this quite a bit now when I'm talking to dealers. In the beginning, I was more of like, oh, come on, you stupid dealers. You didn't see that this was coming. It was going to be revolutionary, whatever. I was kind of in that camp of like, it's easy to beat up on a dealer who was naive and didn't see the value. But I've completely changed my mind about that. And now I'm much more of like, no, because I was in it from the beginning as well. And when you had somebody come in and say, hey, you should be online and put your cars online and upload multiple pictures. And then I'm like, I personally uploaded a picture and knew how long it took to upload one picture in 1997, right? It was crazy. And so it made a lot more sense to me that dealers. Yeah. All the modems, sounds and all that. So back then, I think especially for folks that had been in the car business a long time, they probably saw the internet as, one more. That's why people, I think, even like, I think Ziegler at the time back then was like, this is a fad, it's not going to stick. I think a lot of the, veterans and guys certainly that have been in retail for a long time probably thought, man, we have seen so many things come in as like, you got to have this. It's a new kind of thing, that they probably thought there's no way you understand how my business operates and think that this is going to be helpful to me.
I would disagree a little with you. I think it was more, resistance to it because they saw the fact that the consumer is now gaining power, and I embraced it because I was like, this isn't going away, and let's embrace it. Let's see what we can do. And my boss was completely in agreement. And I remember we got one store to run a BDC, and it was the Ira Toyota store in Danvers, which at one point we were number 7 in the country in volume, but we went from selling 180 cars a month to selling almost 900 cars a month out of that dealership, new and used, out of a 4-acre lot. And a lot of it had to do with how open leadership was at the Ira Group to trying new things. And one of the reasons I grew my career grew so well with them was because I had the same mindset as them in terms of, I know a lot of people hated us back then because they thought we were just giving, cars away and stuff like that. But we were competitive. We were competing. We were trying to, grow our business. And the internet played a part in that, where we would give a price, and then one of our biggest competitors, Bach Toyota, they would give prices. I remember every week we would see who we could go lower on a price of a Camry. It was crazy how competitive it was. But we were competing. We were competitive, and we did well, and we took care of customers, and the customer base grew exponentially. And so, to me, it's all about customer experience. That was a great example right there of a great customer experience at that time. But at the end of the day, Sean, it starts with the marketing dollars you're spending to get the phones to ring, the marketing dollars you're spending to get the leads to come through, and not necessarily just buy leads, but to drive traffic. Social media became a big deal. Anyway, I'll just quickly go through the rest of my history, but I did the BDC. We did it, Ira Toyota. Then I asked David Rosenberg. I said, I actually became a sales manager for a year, and then they wanted me back in the BDC. And I said, listen, if you want me back, I want to do all 13 locations the same way I did it for the Toyota store. And he's like, started yelling at me. He's like, oh, we don't have the money for that, expense, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, listen, you got to do it. Here's why. And then he agreed with me, and we did it. He put me in a room, I remember, with no windows and used furniture above a dealership. And I hired a bunch of people. Some of the people that did that with me are here with me today. Sean and Anthony have been with me since 2001. They run operations here at Strolid all the time. Weekly, daily and monthly, and they're great. And they helped me do it. We hired a bunch of people. And I remember the day we were like, okay, send us phone calls. We're on. And next thing you know, we're scheduling appointments for all the dealerships. And so when you're spending that kind of money in advertising, really, the first and most important thing is that someone picks up the phone, which unfortunately doesn't happen all the time. And to me, if it truly is about the customer experience and the customer, how could you not pick up a phone? And then it was like phone training and all that, which I've been through every single phone trainer there is. We've developed our own proprietary training on handling calls. And then all of a sudden in 2001, leads started coming in. As a matter of fact, leads started coming in 96, 97 through the fax machine.
Yeah, I remember
but
that.
It was a lead, right? It was someone to call, it was someone to talk to. And I was always the phone guy. I hated email back early on because I just didn't feel right. But if I could get somebody on the phone, I could have a conversation with them, find out what their needs are. And then I felt like we could help any customer because we had, biggest inventory around and a good reputation and all that. So it was easy. It became easy because we were so good at what we did. It didn't become easy. You know what I mean? It didn't. Yeah. It wasn't like overnight. It became easy. It was like we had process. That's why it's strong process, solid results. Strolid is because everything was a process. With I don't know if you haven't met David. Yeah, you met David Holt. Everything's process.
Oh yeah,
he's a military guy, so we had a process for everything, and we still do. Some people. I've been reading a lot lately of people saying, "Oh well, we got to give." Employees anonymity and all this other stuff and let them do their thing. Bullshit. I mean, especially if they're not experienced.
Yeah.
Especially if they've never.
Yeah.
They need to know. They need someone to explain not only what we do, but why we do it this way. One of our taglines when we're hiring people is we don't hire people and train them to be nice. We hire nice people. Because that's the hardest thing. Is to find somebody that wants to take care of customers, and that's nice. And we are extensive. We have I'm talking world-class recruiting process right now. And we get some awesome people. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we have training. We have a process to hire people. We have a process to get them into training. We set really solid expectations from them, and then we watch them and manage them. If you want to call that rigid, God bless you trying to run a business any other way.
Oh yeah, I can't imagine the first jobs roles that I had, and what just out of college, just trying to figure out life. I can't imagine one. Like clamoring for, I want, more freedom and more work-life balance and leave me alone and don't micromanage me and all this other, happy shit that people talk about now. I can't imagine getting any substance and having anything to build a foundation off of if I wouldn't have had process. And I tell people often that there were a lot of processes in the Impact, then WorldPack environment of parts warehousing. I worked for that company. I was just a kid, and they brought me up, and I had an amazing mentor, Steve Sims. If you ever see this, much appreciation. That guy put me under his wing, and he was very process oriented, and he taught me processes about warehousing and logistics and delivery routes. I was with that company for 10 years. I went from that company to service writing for a while, and then to Reynolds and Reynolds in 99, 2000, when CarPoint and Microsoft. Like that's the beginning. So I was in the car business for 10 years before digital. And then in digital, my first digital job in 99 with Reynolds and Reynolds, if for no other reason to appreciate the time I was at Reynolds for nearly 8 years. Process, training, lots of training. And I owe a lot of how I operate and my own successes to that. So I can't imagine, to your point, I can't imagine operating a business successfully by just letting people do what you want, make your own hours and your own schedule and follow your own
hours stuff though. I am be funny because I kind of had this argument with somebody recently, but I am more on the new wave of management. It's just that there are certain expectations of the job that you need to perform and do and we allow our employees to call bullshit. If they don't agree with what we do, call bullshit, but come to me with something better. Don't just tell me you don't like doing it. If there's something better out there, we're all ears. We're going to listen. But at the end of the day, we're I tell my managers all the time, I don't care what your schedules are as long as we're covered. And we will. What made us successful as a BDC too, at Group One and IRA, and then now here at Strolid, is we don't make people work every weekend. We don't make them work every night. We don't make them work 50, 60 hours a week. It's a 40-hour week job. There's opportunities to grow into a team lead position that might require 45 hours a week. Our managers are working 45 hours a week, but they might have to put in extra hours to cover for sick time or vacations and stuff like that. But they get paid for that too, right? It's all about.
Well, and this is something that every business does, right? How you cover, it doesn't matter if it's, the type of business that you're in. Any type of business is going to have to accommodate for, hey, we've got people going out on, vacation, or, hey, somebody's called out sick or whatever, that you have that built in so that there's an accommodation for whatever happens as the business ebbs and flows, right? That's a normal part of
You try being on the phone for 8 hours a day for 5 days in a row, nonstop. It's a lot. It's draining. It can be draining, when you're talking to customers all day.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the things that's interesting in this kind of evolution, or the history of the business, and really this is a kind of the history relative to your experience. But one of those points is you and I were both around at the time when dealers didn't have there wasn't such a thing as a website for a business, let alone a social network. And so, what are your memories? What's your recollection from that stage of, hey, you guys were you just mentioned it, you guys were starting to get leads off of the fax machine. So you had lead providers out there before website providers. Some people would say it's around the same time.
I think the lead providers were always one step ahead of dealers, right? They knew they understood the power of building landing pages and conversion pages and getting leads to dealers, and dealers would pay for them. because it was a new thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when you go back to the 70s, 80s, 90s, if you had no one to call, they would throw a phone book at you and say, start dialing. And so when leads became like, oh, we're actually finding people that are interested flowing in, it was like amazing, you know? Now we can just call people. They're telling us they're interested, and we don't have to wonder if they saw the newspaper or heard the radio spot. So it was a big deal. But I mean, two things. One, I got married in 1998, and my wife and I used some of our wedding money to buy a computer. That was my first computer I ever bought, myself personally. It was a compact computer. And, and she was like, what are you buying that for? And it was like $1,800, like $2,500 or something crazy. It was expensive. Anyway, so that was one of my first experiences. But David Rosenberg, I remember, like, it was like 97. He brought me into his office, and he had this big screen computer and had the internet on it, and was showing me all this stuff on the internet. And I was like, interesting. And but at that time, we just got a website in like 98, I think, and for the IRA group, and it was terrible. Probably, I mean, if I look back on it today, I think it was Sean Wolfington's company. What was that website company called back then?
At that time, it was
no, it wasn't Automark. After
they moved on from there, he had stayed out of the game for a while, and then they came back with BZ results.
That's the one.
But that was more in the 2000s, somewhere in the early 2000s.
It wasn't BZ results. Anyway, we had a pretty bad website. And then I remember in 2001, I went to my first NADA convention, and we decided to deal with dealer.com. They were from Vermont, and like no one ever heard of them before. And, their booth had a giant, like a TV screen with the IRA Motor Group, homepage at their booth. And it was like the backdrop. The backdrop was
what was the URL
for that?
What was the URL for that first website? Yeah, do you remember?
Anyway, the backdrop was Boston, you know, and we weren't really in Boston. We were like 20 miles north of Boston, but anyway, that was my first encounter with dealer.com. I'm sure they were very excited to get us as a customer back then. Now you know pretty much who they are. Are you going to show us what it looked like?
Well, we'll see. I don't know if it'll bring up an instance, but it might have been 99. January of 1999. Let's see what it shows us. This was the IRA group. Welcome to the IRA Motor Group.
I remember that website. That was terrible too.
That's what that is what the Wayback Machine remembers about the IRA Motor Group.
Or 2002 or 2003, maybe somewhere in there.
2000. This is like let's go to July 25th, 2001. Let's try that. See what we get.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I remember the Flash.
Does that look familiar? Yeah, everybody was all in on the Flash player.
Can you even look at archive that? Can you even see what it was now?
It's no longer supported. So all the Flash stuff was not well thought of. I mean, it was cool. Dealers loved the, but see all the Flash stuff now. It's no longer supported. This is
it's pretty funny.
That is
so anyway, we started getting to digress for a second. We went from 70s, cars got expensive, people shop by phone. Then leads started happening. From the 90s to the early 2000s, things started getting more transparent for consumers. And I was lucky enough to grow up when we did, because I got to see that transformation. I got to see it go from what it was to what it is, and what it continues to become. And so it's interesting to me, because a lot of people today say, you know, the car business needs disruption. And it's like, it has been disrupted quite a bit, in my opinion. Yeah. And I think the dealer model is a great model if it's run well, right? Run right. Because it's local. They're usually some of the best businesses for the local communities. They help out. They're involved in their local communities. They employ a ton of people. And back in the 80s and 90s, all you had to do was like sell cars and tell your ad agency what the prices of your cars you wanted in the newspaper were, and that was it. Think about what they got to do today. Now they got CRM, they got inventory feeds, they got social media, they got digital media, they got Google paid search. They got all these third-party lead providers. They got all these tools being thrown at them, all these different logins, all this kind of stuff. So like, I personally feel bad for dealers today. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to start Strolid, is because I said, let me take some of that off your plate. Like, why are you trying to manage all that?
Yeah.
It's hard. Like, Josh, who works for me, one of his problems is he says yes to everything. And then eventually he can't do everything. So, because he's got too much on his plate. And I think dealers have too much on their plate.
Yeah. He's amazing.
Yeah. I love Josh. He works his ass off. But my point is, like, you can't possibly, don't get me wrong. There are some great BDCs out there. A lot of dealers have process that probably don't need a BDC, and maybe BDC isn't for everybody. But like, to me, go back to what I said. You're spending all this money on advertising. If the phone rings, make sure someone picks it up quick. If the lead hits, make sure someone emails it professionally and personally quick. If they respond back to you, make sure you're responding back to them quickly. Like, to me, it's, I have ADD, so everything to me is like, I got to keep things simple. But so to me, that's the most simple way I can explain why. Because you spend the money. If you don't handle that first initial impression properly, you're going to lose business. Example, I shopped a dealer recently. Yeah. I have a title to my truck right on my back bookcase there. I want to buy a truck. I saw a Tundra on a dealer's site. I send in an email, no phone number. I just said, I don't want any calls, but just let me know if this is available. Sorry, it's sold, but we have something similar coming in. When can you come in to talk about it? And I said, well, what do you have? What color is it? The next email came to me. This is what it said. Here's the spec sheet. That's it. I clicked on the spec sheet, and it was a freaking double cab. I wanted a crew cab. Oh, come on. We can do better than that. Like, how about the fact that?
And when did you do this? 1978.
I'm not saying every dealer is like that, because obviously they're not, and I'm not saying that not every a lot of dealers have good people that care about their company and all that. But that's all we focus on, is to make sure that experience goes off smooth. And then we communicate a lot to the dealer too, to make sure that we don't miss anything or stuff we can't answer and stuff like that. So like something like that required somebody to say, hey, I get it. There's an inventory shortage. If you're going to buy a Toyota Tundra, we want to make sure you buy it from us. And the best way to do that right now is to, secure one that's incoming. And if I don't have anyone incoming, the next one that comes available, I can put your name on it. How does that sound? Or would you be open to pre-owned? Like, this guy didn't try any of that. And guess what? I have a title to my truck. I own it free and clear. I guess it just doesn't matter right now. That's the scary part about today, where there's no inventory. And, the other thing that these digital retailing tools are going to have a lot of problem with this industry, tackling this industry, is it changes so friggin' much and so fast. Like right now, you can't get your hands on any kind of economical vehicle that's good on gas. But a year and a half ago, dealers couldn't sell them.
Right.
That's just one example.
Yeah.
Trades are through the roof right now. But in a year, they could be in the gutter, and dealers have to really pay close attention to that, because they keep buying overpriced cars, and then the market drops. They're screwed. They're gonna take a beating on it. That's why I've been commenting a lot on LinkedIn about CarMax and Carvana. Like, they keep, dealers are now selling cars to CarMax. That's not going to end well for CarMax, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I think they're going to.
Yeah, the market has been really, really volatile in the last couple of years. Obviously, COVID changed a lot of things, and then the buying spree for dealers to, some dealers were already doing a really good job of managing their pre-owned, their used vehicle department. Others were just kind of mailing it in, just kind of this is the way we've always done it, and not super aggressive and detailed. And then now there's a lot of them that are like, oh yeah, we've got to acquire private party vehicles, kind of like Carvana and CarMax and Vroom and Echo Park and all these others, which is true. They need to be doing that. But it's different when, let's just say 5% of the franchise dealer body is really aggressively trying to up their trade game and also use tools that can help them acquire vehicles from the private party folks. It's one thing when there's a small, maybe a single digit percentage of dealers doing that to, well, now it's 30% or 50% or more. And that alone, I'd love to see somebody that could put together the data of something like that and then how it changes, because this is also still relative to, and then at the end of that, what kind of customer experience are you going to be able to provide?
So let's go back real quick. So I got the 13 stores up and running. I asked David if I could go to GM school. He said yes, NADA Academy. So he sent me there. Thankfully, I appreciated that. One of my goals that I wrote down in 2001 was to become a general manager. So this is like 2005, 2006. I went to GM school. And I took over a dealership. And because of my exposure and the data that I was exposed to in the BDC, which is, to me, like a hidden gem, a hidden secret, that if dealers aren't spending enough time looking at the data that's coming through their BDC, then I don't know why. Like, there's so much good information in there. So I saw a lot of organic traffic coming through our website. David did an advertisement campaign with because we had the BDC running so well, we had an ad company called Zimmerman, and we went with the messaging of "Call Me" from Blondie. So everywhere on the radio, TV, and then there was like IRA, zero down at IRA. We had so many good slogans, but the "Call Me" one was specifically because we had the process in place to handle the calls. And we knew we were going to give people a good experience and good price. Nobody else was doing it. So like we were, taking advantage of that, which was brilliant. And then we went to Click Me when the website started getting popular. And we saw our website traffic really increase from about 2001 to 2005. So I became a GM. I remember being in the GM meeting, and I told David I wanted to cancel the Boston Globe. I'm sure if anyone from the Boston Globes hears this podcast, they're probably not going to be too happy, but all the GMs go like, are you crazy? That like, that's going to kill your business. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, listen, I've been tracking it. Customers aren't coming in with the Boston Globe under their so I saved $15,000 a month, and I used 5,000 of it with some local company that I had been talking to about paid search. So I used $5,000 of it, started paying for search. Back then it was cheap to pay for search. Guess what? My lead volume increased. Yeah. I took a store that wasn't making money for 3 years. It was a 3-year-old store, and we started making money in 4 or 5 months. The traffic was, I had the BDC following up. I had my salespeople following up on leads. We cleaned the store up because it was a mess when I got there. And then about, a year later, David asked me to come back to the BDC and do it for the whole East Coast. But the good news, I consider myself like blessed and privileged because of what I said earlier. We grew up in a time where all this stuff was new. It was, and I got to experiment and try new things and watch it evolve, and it was fun. And I'm not saying it's not fun anymore, but like when I whittle it down, Sean, to what the core is that I do, it's how do I get more customers to help my dealers, but how do I give the customer a better experience to increase the probability of selling a vehicle to somebody? And it's kind of depressing right now because That's not as important right now because dealers don't have cars. But we're still taking care of lots of leads for dealers and doing our best to make sure.
Dealers, they've really been able to, take advantage. Not necessarily all of them in a bad way, but they've been able to take advantage of this last couple of years, even with inventory shortages. They sell everything they're going to get, and they're selling everything. Hey, you want to pre-order? You want to put your name on something coming in? And I understand that, and I don't have a problem at all. I know you don't either of dealers, having to roll with whatever the punches may be. But I've been saying this, and you and I have actually had some dialogue about this. You also have to be really careful as a dealer that you don't abuse the leverage that you have, right? You have leverage, in availability that also then parlays into leverage on pricing and leverage on, customer experience. Like, are you really you just gave an example of why wouldn't you at least take the time to say, hey, you probably know this, inventory shortages have been an issue and we're sorry that somebody else picked up this one you're interested in, but just gives you a little bit of assurance, makes you feel good. Yeah, it's just basic communication. It's not difficult, but there are a lot of dealers who are doing that, and then there are a lot of dealers who are not doing that. It'll be interesting to see.
It's going to hurt. The problem with the
payoff
there's probably any sales type structure is it's a month-to-month gig, right? That's the problem. That's what needs to change in the car industry. People aren't. Yeah, they're worried about next month right now. They're not worried about July's almost over, right? So next month. They try to make a living that month, and then the next month they try to make a living that month, and no one's. Hopefully, the dealer principals and the GMs are smart enough to think long term, and not just what's going on today. Because you're right, it will erode their business at some point if they have competition around them that is doing a better job at trying to work with customers today. Because we listen to so many calls, Sean. People are angry today. Customers are very angry. I feel bad for my people because they're doing their best to calm the situation down and try to help them. And people are they call from way out of state and all kinds of crazy stuff. Just panic, frantically looking for inventory. We are seeing it to break in a little bit in certain models, but one thing I did want to talk about though, you brought up websites. So we got the dealer.com website, and what I started doing is tracking leads, right? So I started tracking stuff that came from the website, stuff that came from the factory, because we get factory leads, and then stuff that came from cars.com, Auto Trader, but really the third party leads. And I segregated those over the years. And so when I got to become a general manager, I knew that the organic traffic converted better. So I wanted more website traffic. It's just that simple, right? It wasn't rocket science, cause I tracked it. That's why I said, if you're a general manager and you're not paying attention to the reporting, within, some guys, you talked about lead addiction. They just go up and buy a ton of leads and think that their BDC should close them all at 10% lead to close. It's just not the case. Cause I find it hard to find, a dozen to 24 people that have more experience with this than me. And honestly, I've been tracking it consistently and rigorously for over 20 years. And third-party leads just don't close as well. Some of them are terrible. Some of them dealers should never even sign up for. The factory leads can be good. But the organic traffic, your local market, you want to make sure you're all over that kind of stuff. Engagement we measure now, all kinds of stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it starts with being nice to a customer. So all this digital retailing talk today, in 2007, I was given control for the whole East Coast for Group 1 for digital marketing. I had custom websites built throughout because it was so bad. Some of our dealers, just their websites look terrible. Their pictures, their notes. Me and the used car director at Group 1, his name's Rick Bickford. We did a tour. We went on the road and taught everybody how to take pictures and put notes on cars. And Mark Burak from Liquid Motors, you went with me when you were at Reach Local. We just tackled the whole East region and got everybody kind of working the internet. But I installed a credit app called Dealer Centric, right? on every website.
Remember?
All of our finance managers were trained to pull a credit app. This is 2007 now. We were giving pricing. We had Lease Profit, which is a market scan tool, that we would run leases for people. And we had a process that we would, when we scheduled an appointment, the managers at the stores would get email and they would know, and it would be in the CRM and all that kind of stuff. And we would go out and train that process to every dealership and say, hey, when the customer comes in, this is what they're expecting. They're expecting to see the manager, having the manager call and confirm the appointment, all that kind of stuff we developed over the years. And that was, to me, digital retailing.
Yeah.
Now today they want everybody to kind of funnel through this like tool and do it themselves. And I'm like laughing because it's not. Think about it. You got inventory shortage. You got price volatility. You got finance. You got registration, trade information, all this kind of stuff. Customers have questions. Unless you're a super geek, right? Do you have I think I told you this before, but we have, we used to put all our employees through disc profiling. What I thought was most interesting about disc profiling is only 18% of the population, 18% don't like to talk to people. 60% want to trust you. They want to make sure that they can, that you trust them. They trust you, that there's a relationship there, that they want to feel comfortable, all that kind of stuff. 60%. Now there's another 11%. That's where 12%. That's where I fall into, which is like a laydown. But they're salespeople, right? They're social. So now you take 60 plus 12. That's 72% of the population that want to deal with other people. And we want to eliminate that. Why? Because who's running the world right now? Microsoft, Amazon, Google, all these geeks. But people are social.
Meta.
People want to talk to people. And I hope that never ends because God forbid.
Yeah.
That's what my grandmother would do. God forbid.
Well, then I won't drop some info on you, right?
But think about that. Think about what I just said. 72% of the people are social beings. Yeah, we're trying to eliminate all that by forcing them through some app.
Well, and we're also creating virtual versions of social connection. And you mentioned it. I don't remember if we actually said TikTok on the recorded episode thus far, but TikTok's been eating Facebook's lunch. Yeah. And they know it. And just wait, because I've already read a couple articles just this week about now what direction Facebook/Meta is going in terms of experiences and really what TikTok's already doing. That is not, when you watch something on TikTok or a Facebook story or an Instagram reel and you're loving it and it's entertaining and it's all great, that is not the same thing as actually being face to face with somebody. It's not the same. It appeases that part of somebody's mind because you get a dopamine hit of like, like you feel good.
I stopped
because you're entertained.
I think people are mad at me because I was pretty active on it years ago.
And
I don't even, if I remember, I might go and wish somebody a happy birthday once in a while, but I try to stay off it just because of what you just said. Mm-hmm. It is depressing to me, especially during that last election, just to see how vicious people getting with each other and stuff.
There was a vicious election.
No, but it was
in America. What? You mean it affected people's friendships? You mean it illuminated the crazies?
It was sickening.
I know. People have, I think I shared this story with you recently. People, unfortunately, in the last few years, it's just gotten worse. It's been building over time. Internet, and as it relates to people, car business, customer experience, and all that. But even in personal relationships and family members, people are now more distorted and cannot clearly and cleanly see the middle. The middle includes disagreement. The middle includes, you don't have to have the same philosophies or beliefs and all that kind of stuff. It's like, that's okay. I can tolerate those differences. No problem.
I enjoy arguing.
Because I like all these other things, and we have all
growing
these
up in an Italian family, we argued a lot. But no one loved each other more than the people in that family. Mm-hmm. And just because we don't agree with each other doesn't mean we hate each other. I can't understand the hatred that's coming out of
right.
I'll give you a quick example. There's probably dealers, BDC managers, or someone out there that's going to listen to this and go, he's just promoting his business and he's trying to put me out of business or whatever and hate it and try to argue with me or some of the topics I've talked about, probably, they have a different opinion on it. Great. This is, how I saw the history unfold, right, to where we're at today. And I met you in 2009 at a digital dealer conference. And then you joined Reach Local a couple of years later, I think. Right?
I think a little earlier than that, but yeah.
2000, maybe
around that time.
Maybe I was at
Reach Local during Cash for Clunkers.
2007,
was 08,
I met you at Digital Dealer. Yeah.
There you go.
Anyway, that was where I discovered, holy shit, because I'm a data guy, right? I'm like, wow, they got so many customers in their database. Like, there's a gold mine. We're not even talking to them. So we started, and the next thing you know, there's auto alerts and all these other companies popping up a few years later. And then social media came, and I took over everyone's Facebook page in the East Coast because I knew dealers weren't going. I remember I got invited to speak to all the general managers at a Group 1 conference in Houston, and they wanted me to talk about social media and Facebook. And like, I literally had a Facebook page for maybe a year. And here I am, the expert on stage, telling everybody all about social media. You came out with Reachcast, remember? And I was really all about it. Yeah, and so that was another phase, right? So you had search, then you had database, then you had, none of it really changed the problem, is my point. Then you had, which it's not a problem. None of it really ever changed the fact that you want to give a good customer experience. That's the core of it, right?
Yes.
And I think dealers do give good customer experiences to the most part, especially compared to 20 or 30 years ago. I had told you this before, but there was a post recently for some girl talking about this Gen Z crazy, because the millennials were talking about it all the time 10 years ago. Now you don't hear from them as much, but the Gen Z and how if you're a business, you need to equip us with the right technology and all this other stuff, because we prefer it, we demand it. And I'm like, my comment back to her was, do you think none of us wanted better technology 20 years ago? Do you think none of us wanted it to be easier? Of course we did. It just, it evolves. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen overnight. You don't just snap your fingers and all of a sudden digital retailing is a thing.
You weren't too harsh with this Gen Zer, were you?
I hope
you
not.
didn't make.
I don't know. People are very sensitive nowadays, so maybe I did. I don't know. I didn't mean to. Sorry if you're listening to me, but the point I'm trying to make is it isn't any different. It's just evolving, right? You're just going to stay in tune to it.
Yeah.
Disruption is another crazy word. People talk about AI. That's the new buzzword recently. Digital retailing, AI. So what is AI today? If you ask a technologist, artificial intelligence is using data to understand things, right? And then build tools to help streamline process, right? But it's not. People call notifications AI now. No, it's not AI. It's a notification. They've been around for a long time. Mm-hmm. Automations, they call AI. No, that's not AI. That's been around for a long time as well. Or they talk about bots. Yeah, a bot. You can teach it to say a few sentences and then take over, on a chat. We do that with service on our service. But it's not really AI. Right. And then there's AI that Sean, we're going to send you an email. And then when you respond, we alert the dealer, and that's AI. No, it isn't. Every CRM can do that. and no one calls it, only certain people call it AI. So just be careful out there with that. That's the new craze. And it makes me crazy every time I hear someone calling something AI, because it's really not. Like, to me.
Yeah, AI is that chess playing robot that earlier this week, did you see that headline? The kids were playing in the tournament, and that AI robot was so smart that the kid was making a move apparently when it wasn't time to move, or he was adjusting a piece on the board, and the robot grabbed the kid's finger and would not let it go, and then continued to hold on. And all these adults were trying to, and it broke the kid's finger. The AI in the chess playing robot. So if that were my kid, I'd be like, you know what? Maybe we could just play chess with dad and grandpa, and like we'll stay out of the robot chess tournaments for now.
But it is scary, Some really, really bright, smart, super smart think tank type people are talking about like 50-60% of the jobs in 30 years are going to be gone, and 50% of the population is going to be living off the government and all that kind of stuff because of AI and automation. So be careful what you wish for, is my word of advice.
Yeah, I'm not wishing for it. I hope I'm
human beings are social beings. They need other social. They need to be social. If it ever gets to the point where a computer and robot does everything for me and I don't need to talk to anybody, that's a definition of depression for me. I mean.
Yeah. It's going to be very, very interesting. It'll be interesting how, real artificial intelligence, actually is transformative in industries like automotive and like customer service. Do you think there will ever be I guess somebody could be listening or watching to this episode and saying it's here now, but do you think there's ever going to be an artificial intelligence factor that provides a better experience for the customer than what we're doing with people?
Because, I have a CTO, Thomas Howe, now, and he's building some great tech for us. And the way I look at AI and the way I look at technology is the way we built it 20 years ago, it wasn't that good. And it caused other problems. For example, click this button, click that button, make sure you set this up properly, make sure you set that properly, and you still miss shit. And then someone doesn't use the technology properly, so it doesn't spit out the right data. But what it should do, it should be simplified, and the AI and the technologists should make it so it's kind of like what an iPhone is now. I mean, who can't use an iPhone? It's so simple. But you look at a dealer CRM, it's pretty complicated.
Yeah.
We're trying to help that. As a matter of fact, we're working with eLead and Solutions, Dealer Socket now. We have, we're working with Techion, with their API, because they're open to being open and working with us, because they realize, I hope that they can't do everything for every dealer, and that we can help support their system. And then there's some other CRM companies out there that, oh no, we got the best. We don't need anyone's help. We got all this AI, and dealer only needs us and they don't need anyone else. They're going to be out of business in the future, because at the end of the day,
there's certainly there's opportunities for collaboration that that being open to that seems to be the smarter move, especially when you got somebody moving significant moving pieces. It's difficult for
the OEM shops the dealers all the time for like quality. Some of these systems, they don't even, the lead didn't even come in. And then the poor BDC team's getting beat up because they failed a mystery shop, or something like that. Like, because these systems don't work perfectly, and so I think that's where technology is going. It's going to get better. There's going to be better programs. There's going to be better CRM type programs that might utilize some automation and things to take away the minutia. Because frankly, working in a BDC, there's a lot of minutia. We've eliminated a lot of that with our tech. So people can talk to people instead of spend half their day working on a CRM to make sure it spits out the right report. You would not believe, Sean, how many dealers we talk to where their BDCs have the thing rigged so they can get a 1 minute response. I literally had a GM of a store. Thank God we didn't do business with them. Tell me, when I told him we were 10 minutes or less with a personalized response, he said, that's not good enough. And I'm like, okay. but it's personalized. Remember, some of these emails come through with complicated questions and things like that you got to research. No, we're at 2 minutes or less. But here's your trophy. Shop them. Guess what it is?
Yeah,
it's a bullshit email that gets sent out just to stop the clock. Or as people are stopping the clock on the phone because they know this maniac is going to beat them up if they're over 2 minutes. I mean, it's so stupid.
Right. And so how long has that stuff been going on now?
I mean, some of these places, they have pay plans for their management and BDC staff. And then they just game the system, and the poor dealer principal or owner or GM doesn't have time to really examine what they're doing, maybe for 6 months or a year, like that kind of stuff. And so the technology we're building eliminates that kind of stuff. You can't do it. First of all, we can't do that as a company because we'll get fired. They'll cancel us if we're cheating them. Mm-hmm. But number two, we try to be as transparent, open with the data we're seeing so we can make improvements to get better instead of, harping on a 2-minute response time.
Yeah. It's interesting that because the stop the clock situation has been going on for I don't know how many years, a long time now, a long time.
Some OEMs are
and it got worse when the OEM. Yeah. Do you remember when GM, let's just call them out, whatever. I'm not a GM guy, but I'm not a hater either. But General Motors was the first one that I remember that had this incentive built in. Hey, stop the clock. And if you were achieved this thing, then had something to do with co-op dollars. Remember that time period?
They measured the clock 24.
365.
Ironically, I need response 24/7 now, but not because of General Motors. It was because they're doing chat during those times anyway. And believe it or not, there are a lot of people chatting at that time. So we decided, hey, let's answer leads that come in overnight too. Personally, not an automated response. We have an actual human being that reads every lead to make sure that if there's questions or personalize it to the best of our ability. And that's it. It takes labor to do that. Like we have to pay people to do that. We're not paying an automation for that because frankly, I've seen a lot of automations. An automation can't answer a product question yet.
But that's a perfect example of stop the clock because I'm focused on the dealer's side of this equation. That's not thinking about providing good consumer experience. What you just described, the way you guys do it, that is prioritizing. We want the experience for the customer to be authentic, to be real. You're getting a real person. We're here 24 hours a day versus, hey, let's put some sort of automation rule in so that we don't get a negative mark by, the overlords from the manufacturer. You just described the difference between taking the importance of a quick quality response and how it's handled is very different. If it's mail it in so you don't get slapped by your overlords at the whatever level, if it's management company, if it's the OEM versus, no, we're going to do it the right way, the way that the customer wants to be communicated with. That's the difference. That's exactly what you're talking about. Big.
I mean, just to summarize, you went from buying from your local dealer because everything was local. Everything was local. Like you went to the local hardware store, you went to the local, place to buy a suit, you went to the local car dealer. Now it's not like that. So, and then, 70s inflation, cars got expensive. 80s people started shopping more. 90s people started shopping more. And then the internet happened and brought in a tremendous amount of transparency and gave us new ways to market to customers, which we're still exploring. Like this podcast, for example, is something somewhat new in terms of, helping get messaging and stuff like that out there. And it's always changing. I like when you approached me on this idea, I liked it right away. And some things I don't like. And, some people are going to agree with what I say today and some people aren't. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, listen, this is a great place, I think, to park this one. covers a lot of ground for folks that don't have some of the historical perspective. I know a lot of people that are newer to the car business that when I tell them stories from the 90s, they're like, what? Or when I tell them about my own childhood experiences of having an uncle that was both the service and the parts manager in a tiny Ford store and how I can still smell the inside of that tiny Ford dealership. I mean, the little chiclet gumball machines, putting a penny in, all these awesome stories. It's a great industry, and it's one that has so many touch points with the consumer that it will be great to continue to unpack all of these, ways to help dealers and help the automotive industry understand how we keep getting better and we keep improving. And guess what? You hear me say it all the time. Experience is the great differentiator, and you have probably an uncalculatable number of years and time invested and sacrifice to get that experience. I think it's going to be really beneficial on this podcast. So regarding this episode, if you like, love, or none of the above, we'd still love to hear from you. The Dealer Insights podcast gets better with comments, questions, and feedback and recommendations from you, the listener or the viewer. So drop them in the comments section below, especially if you're watching this on YouTube, or you can send them to info@Strolid. That's spelled STROLID. info@Strolid.com. And until next time, stay strong and solid.
Thanks,
and you'll never miss.
Thanks. Appreciate it.